Hello, I'm Wendy Wilson, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Realizing Potential. I'm always excited to engage with our various guests. They come from outstanding and very diverse backgrounds. This one is probably at the top of the list for 1,001 reasons. I'm a big fan of hers, and just excited about what she continues to do, what she's already done. She has a remarkable story. You might be a little familiar with her, and I'm just teasing when I say that you will certainly recognize who this guest is and the work that she continues to do. She is none other than the Erica Savage Wilson. Hello, how are you?
Good day, Dr. Wilson. I am fantastic. And I want to say thank you to the production staff of Realizing Potential, Connie, and everybody that's working on the other side of the screen. And definitely big appreciation to your president and all of the administrators at the Unsinkable Albany State University. It is absolutely my pleasure to be here today.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Spoken like a woman who has her own show, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. You certainly have roots here in Albany, Georgia. You have traveled and lived across the globe. You're certainly a globe trekker, as I have fondly referred to you. But you are now residing in Washington, D.C., in the DMV area, actually. And you have an amazing career, much of which has been dedicated to politics. And I refer to you also have so many great pet names for you. One of which is, of course, your premier political analyst. But over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years now, you shifted a little bit. We wanted to talk about that because, of course, it's Women's History Month, and you will also share that this month also has another designation. So we'll go into that, but I'll let you tell that story about why it is so important to you, in addition to Women's History Month, Mental Health Awareness Month. So give the viewers who may not be familiar with your recent story over the last 2 years, or if you'd like to, let's go back to your passion for politics and how that segued into a different arena.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson. So I am and have always been very, very in tune with politics, grew up watching the news. And so that was something that always intrigued me, particularly when world affairs would be brought into the discussion as it relates to the news. And what for me that really did was it showed me that we were really all interdependent on one another. And I think that that is a part of the human experience. But politics is something that impacts everyone. And so a famous House Speaker many years ago, back in the late 70s and 80s, Tip O'Neill would say that all politics is local. And I extended that out to all politics is very personal. And so when we think about people actually being born, that is a political act within itself. And so just always really stay connected to politics, world affairs. And I found myself, though I was not, some people have the trek where they go to college, they study political science, and then they maybe enter a couple of programs and they start working for campaigns. My lane was a little bit differently. I found myself continuing to read, continuing to buy books, newspaper, things of that nature, but I volunteered on campaigns. So it wouldn't matter if it was a local campaign, a state campaign. And so that is how I actually entered into this space, I would say officially into politics, working on local campaigns in my hometown of Albany, Georgia, when I lived there, moved on to state campaigns, and then a congressional campaign. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go to a political boot camp that the Congressional Black Caucus Institute runs annually. And it was there that I met with some amazing people from all across the United States. And some of the connections that I made months later, got an email to say, hey, there's a position for you here in DC. We think you would be great for it. And I'm thinking to myself, I've only known and met these people a week, but they were very impressed. I responded in the affirmative. And then got the job and moved to the DC area. It's now been almost 6 years ago, amazingly. So that was really kind of my funnel into politics, and worked as a director of a political consulting and data management firm. And that in and of itself was so rewarding because I was able to not only impact campaigns that were around the DMV area, but also in foreign countries as well. So I would say to anyone that is listening, make sure that you embed yourself in something that really absolutely speaks to you, because you would be surprised at the places that it can take you.
Indeed. And before we segue into what then transitioned or transpired while you were on assignment working for this firm, I need to go back to something that you said in regards to, lo and behold, they were very impressed with you. And I was very fortunate enough to be a part of that journey with you, and courting the organization or the company that you work with. And what I've always said, and when I speak to individuals about their career and development, is that your reputation is so critical to your journey, and it will precede you. So it was no surprise to me that they were impressed with you. You and I've had this conversation on countless occasions about you're on the right path when the job seeks you out and you don't necessarily seek out the job. So that was certainly the case with you. You had immersed yourself in the development and acquiring knowledge as it relates to being an active and influential leader in the world of politics. And so I know that is why they gave a call or made a call to you and said, "Hey, we need you on your team." And you did an exceptional job. I'd be remiss if we did not share with the viewing audience. You have certainly traveled the globe and done amazing work and very impacting work in South Sudan. And so that's a whole nother story. We will have you come back to share that at length. But let's go into why, again, this month is critically important as it relates to mental health and awareness. So there was an event that changed and altered your life significantly. Share with the viewers what happened and where you are with that, and how you, what I love, the whole adage about making lemons out of lemonade, you certainly did that beautifully. So I could go on bragging about you. So you tell the story.
Sure, Dr. Wilson. And you mentioned the travel to South Sudan. And so I traveled to South Sudan. So it had been a whirlwind type of last few years. So 2019, traveled to South Sudan as an emissary, and was very fortunate to do work there. I was in Uganda as well. So that was 2019. And then 2020, we had the all too important general election. So our firm was very active in the general election. And right after that, or while that was happening, my home state, both of where we both lived at the time, Georgia was on the map as well. Two very important senatorial elections. So our firm was very much so embedded in that work as well. So 2019, 2020, just very, very active years. 2018, that was midterm. So it was a very, very active 2018, 2019, 2020. And we were also doing work around COVID-19 to ensure that communities that did not have access to the vaccine, they did. If they didn't, then why be a part of that as well? So very active in that those years. So in March of 2021, I was actually about to get back on the road after Georgia showed up and showed out. I was getting back on the road to do our COVID-19 work, headed to Georgia. And while I was traveling for work, about 11 o'clock in the morning, I had an 18-wheel truck that hit my car twice while traveling on I-20. It was that was just startling because, number one, it's a Monday morning, it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm traveling for work, not even thinking about an event like that happening. What came of that event is that just moving forward is that I was diagnosed with having a traumatic brain injury. I sustained a number of injuries to include my shoulder, my arm, my leg, and my feet on the left side of my body. And also, there was an invitation, as I have said, to several other unseen injuries, anxiety, insomnia, lots of dizziness, things of that nature. And so, as my brain, I had a brain injury practitioner that said to my family, essentially that this high functioning executive that you once knew is essentially a toddler. So to say that, to say you really have to treat her with white gloves, so to speak. And so, as you well know, it was pretty traumatic, not just for myself, but for all family and friends that love me because my speech, I developed speech issues. And I entered into a program, which I am still in. It's a polytrauma program that provides a suite of services. So everything from physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech pathology, a traumatic brain injury doctor, acupuncturist, driver rehabilitation, home health care, which I am still actively receiving, and mental health. And the mental health piece is critically important because with my mental health, I have those services with a neuropsychologist and a therapist weekly. And then those services are overseen by my psychiatrist. Those things are very important because when we're talking about the brain really does power everything in our body. And so that is all important to know because this month is Brain Injury Awareness Month. And Brain Injury Awareness Month is something that I didn't know about before, but it's so very important because what it allows for me and folks that are like me to do is to really share with everyone the importance of brain health and unseen injuries. And so particularly as we are continuing to traverse through a pandemic where anxiety, insomnia, and stressors have really spiked during this time, it is also a way to let people know that though you may not have a diagnosis, that you're seen. And so these are some ways that you can create an environment of wellness without being perhaps diagnosed as myself and many others have been.
Thank you so much. Ooh. Connie's going to get on me. And so I'm trying to compose myself. Thank you for sharing that story. And I was reliving it as you were sharing it with our viewers because as a part of your family that loves and adores you, was a part of that day. And you called because you were en route and to Albany and had already made plans to, as you so often have, in full transparency, just stay at my home. And for those that don't know, you are not like a sister, but you are a sister to me. And so families are very close. And so I will never forget that day. And then your mom reaching out and saying that you had been in the accident, and then you calling later on and sharing the stages that you went through in the hospital, not getting the proper care that you deserved that day. And so a lot has happened in that time period. Thank you for sharing the piece about the impact that it had on your loved ones, because again, this extremely high functioning executive who would be on phone calls in the middle of the night with Israel, taking meetings on a very regular basis, had to make a major shift. And that took a huge toll, not only on you, but again, as I shared, on loved ones, and not to minimize the direct impact that it had on you as an individual. As you have said on so many occasions in just interviews nationally, is that you had to grieve the loss of the former Erica. I've never shared with you, that was always difficult for me to hear you say that, because what we know or what we so often experience or observe is that challenges with mental health or brain injuries or injuries to the body are not always visible. And so you, of course, the same amazing, beautiful, intelligent woman that sits before me and the viewers. But then there were just some times where I would note some differences, and I said, that's exactly what I see. I see what she means now. So it has been a lot. As I started off just saying that always have been a huge fan and great admiration for you on so many different levels. And just always honored to honor you, and particularly in Women's History Month, because you epitomize all that an amazing woman is. But you have gone through a lot, but you are still standing. And so what I love most now, adding to the list of reasons why I love and adore Erica Savage Wilson, is you said, my life still continues on. It's shifted. We're doing some things differently now. And my passion for excellence is now going to then resonate, bloom, grow in the space of mental health and wellness. And so from now transitioning, and you're still in this space of political awareness and engagement, because this is a topic that is critical and so important and needs to be shared and further advanced throughout the country. Again, mental health and wellness. I understand President Biden spoke about that during the State of the Union address. I'll let you talk about that. But let's start talking about the reframed brain. Tell our viewers.
Sure, and would love to get into that. And I want to pause here, and I want to say to the audience and to you, Dr. Wilson, how much I honor you. I moved through the story a bit quickly because I understand the impact of really getting into the story has on the people that were walked with me through this. And so I don't minimize how integral you have been. Dr. Wilson has, been here to care for me during that time. So she saw me in a very fragile state. And there have been a small number of other people who have been able to do that or really were allowed to do that. So it's really been very close family, friends, people that I intimately trust, that my mom and dad intimately trust. And so I was very, very glad to have that small circle of people that thought it not robbery to come to sit with me, to, sit on the couch and just let me kind of be who I was during that time. And so I just want to share with the audience, there's much, much more to the story. And however, I'm moving through it with an understanding of what happened, and actually kind of re-sharing that again definitely does have impact on the people that went through it. Before I move into the Reframed Brain, you mentioned the national media that I've done, and I'm so grateful to do that most recently on the Clay Kane show here with Realizing Potential and Roland Martin Unfiltered, that I used to do those with regularity, particularly Roland Martin Unfiltered, and have done international media, particularly after we had the historic Madam Vice President assuming the second highest position in the land. That what it takes for me now to do media is a lot of prep work before, because my body responds in the same way that it did on March 15th with that accident. So I'm very, very grateful to be a part of this platform. I'm very grateful to you, Dr. Wilson, to Iman and LJ for the way that they have been very much so a part of this, checking in to make sure that I'm okay, letting me know that they're praying for me. So for everyone else to understand, when someone has an injury, that it is a community, it is a part of a collective, and that those people do move through that as well. And so when I think about the then platform that I developed, the Reframed Brain, what really kind of helped me take a real pivot is because I have this history of media. I have this history of lifting my voice in the face of very, very difficult situations. And so I wanted to say that, well, if I'm experiencing this, if I have people that love me that are actually experiencing this along with me, then I know that there are people that have had this experience as well. And I want to be able to speak to them and speak to the people that have cared for them, people that love them, to share about around those unseen injuries and perhaps some things that they didn't know that can help improve their own brain health, but help them understand as well what that looks like. So the Reframed Brain podcast is a podcast that is available visually and audio. And what it does is it centers brain health and unseen injuries. It envelops all of us because, as I said earlier, all of us have experienced the pandemic. So, as I said about the podcast on Twitter, if you have been in the pandemic, then this podcast is for you. And what it sheds a light on is that a lot of what we experience, even through social media, what we experience on a day-to-day basis in our job spaces, in our home lives, actually impacts our entire body, particularly our immune system. And so when, unbeknownst to us, because we cannot see this, when we don't get good sleep, when we're in toxic environments at work, when we're in toxic environments outside of work, that really does impact our immune system. Our brain, we have two major parts of our brain. That's the old reptilian brain, and then there's the new brain. That old reptilian brain is where the amygdala, which is like a little pea size, it's really, really small. And that's where fight or flight lives. So that's the kind of, if you see a saber-toothed tiger, you don't go run up and you don't walk up and pet it, you run the other way. That's the old reptilian brain. The new brain, where your executive functioning is housed, the frontal lobe, that is where logic, reasoning, processing takes place. That part of my brain, the root system, was damaged. And so everything that I moved out of was from fight or flight. We can't live in fight or flight all the time. We need to be able to process. And so if we're in environments that don't allow for that, where it's kind of fight or flight all of the time, that impacts our immune system. So understanding that I do have a brain injury, but there are also people that are dealing with a lot of anxiety, that are not sleeping well because they're thinking about work tomorrow, they're thinking about the kids, that there are people that are moving through a lot of stressors and worrying, depression. For some people, it's seasonal. That because of all of the suite of services that I have received, I have a more intimate, experience-driven, and very honest understanding of what it takes for the brain to function at its optimal level. So this is me saying I want to share that, and I want to share that on a wider level. I want to share things that people may not have otherwise thought about, like blueberries are really great for brain function and improving memory. So thinking about how often maybe we're at the grocery store and maybe passing over a pint of blueberries, get that pint of blueberries, clean them up really good, and keep them in the fridge so you can pop some in throughout the day, understanding that no. Before we go to bed, it's really best that we have the television off. And there's some soundscapes that different streaming services offer, so that there's not that blue screen that's emitting, and that we're getting really proper rest, so that we're not opening ourselves to possible dementia and Alzheimer's, of which Black and African Americans overrepresent for. So the Reframed Brain is a really renewed perspective. And that is something that I have gained in moving through this brain injury.
Outstanding. Let's take a break for just a moment, and then we'll come back. I'd like for you to share about upcoming opportunities that are related to Reframed Brain, some of the guests that you've had already, what that portfolio looks like, and how people can connect with you. Okay? Viewers, will be right back.
Hey!
Where are you all headed?
Today's the day for our second COVID vaccine shot. We want to be ready for back to school.
I was kind of waiting. I wasn't sure how it would impact my child. How are you doing? How did you feel after your first shot? Well, my arm was a little sore, like Dad's, but other than that, I'm fine. I just hope all my friends get vaccinated so we can hang out again.
I know the information about the virus keeps changing, but I know my children are safe or vaccinated. The vaccines have been rigorously researched and tested and can protect us from getting infected.
All right, Mom, so when are we going to get vaccinated?
Let's get registered when we go to the grocery store today. I've seen the COVID vaccine signs at the pharmacy.
That's great.
So, are you getting excited about starting college in the fall?
Yes, ma'am.
Call your local pharmacy, health department, or medical center for information on how to schedule your vaccination. This message is brought to you by the Albany State University Quash COVID Initiative. Let's get back to normal. Plan your vaccine today. Call your local pharmacy, health department, or medical center for information on how to schedule. Together, we can quash COVID, but it takes everyone's help. This message is brought to you by Albany State University and the Albany State University Quash COVID Initiative. Albany State University. Excellence is the standard.
Viewers, thank you so much for returning to Realizing Potential. Of course, I'm Wendy Wilson, and here with the outstanding, amazing, there are so many descriptive words for her, Erica Savage Wilson, and she's talking about the change in her life over the last 2 years, dramatic change, but she is a champion in every sense of the word. And I see her name has changed, brain injury champion. She is oh my goodness. Anyway, I won't continue to belabor the moment with all of the reasons why I absolutely adore her. But we're talking about her shift from politics, if you will, in the traditional sense. And she's kind of narrowed that focus of politics. And now in the space of mental health and wellness, she has an exemplary podcast called The Reframed Brain. There's some other aspects of that that business that she now has, and she's still on a very international platform. We were just talking about her diagnosis, how she's been navigating with that, and how she is representing those individuals who also have suffered from brain injuries and how they are then navigating that space. Erica, if you would talk about, we're going to talk about some of the guests that you've already had and that viewers and listeners can expect in the near future. I don't want to miss, you talked about just sustaining brain health and improving. You talked about blueberries. We have a shared love of plants. And will you share with the viewers, I read something the other day about, and I had always, it certainly has had this impact on my life. They're very, just the environment itself, when you have plants within, it helps with the whole oxygen levels, and it's just a very calming and serene process. But then I was reading that there has been actually some studies to show that it helps with those who are suffering from depression. So talk about how plants have improved your life, and they are integral, a part of your life at this point.
Absolutely. So I want to start by saying that this was not a love that I had prior to my brain injury. Now, when I would be at your home, which is absolutely like stepping into a sanctuary, it's plants and the bookcases and the floor, the furniture, the art, it's all there. So outside of being in the company of plants at your home or anyone else's home that had plants, it really wasn't my thing. As a matter of fact, one of the joking things that I talk about is that I actually, in the office that I worked in, I had a lovely, lovely pair of silk tulips and never had to water them, and they were always alive. And so that was kind of my relationship with flowers or plants. But as probably a month after the accident, I really, really felt a real desire to have something else that was living. And I made the request to say, hey, if you're going to send me anything, to send me plants. And I'm very proud to say that there's a lovely spider plant. If viewers can see that it's above me. It's one of the first plants I received. Dr. Wilson sent that plant. And so it is doing fantastic. But to talk about plants and what they do, particularly you talked about around depression, I share with people that this is to my left, to your right, this lovely Sansevieria, which is also known as a snake plant. Her name is Cleopatra. And then to my right, to you all's left, this is my birds of paradise. Her name is Birdie. I keep them beside me because they give me a feeling of safety. And if at any time I feel overwhelmed, I can just take my hands and slip it into the soil. What that does for us is that grounds us. There's something, a grounding technique that if we're able to, if we have a yard or we have some grass nearby, we take our shoes, take our socks off, and we put our feet, it grounds us with the earth. It is something that is very powerful, something that can bring a real sense of calm. And it was something that was practiced with me very early on through my physical therapy care. And I found it to be very useful. So even in the house, we have wood flooring. If I feel overwhelming, I'll slip off my socks and I will ground myself to the earth. But as it relates to the plants are very, very helpful in it, the grounding technique as well. And they're also very beautiful to look at, particularly sansevierias. They're very easy to take care of. They're called plants of steel, but they do, as you spoke about just earlier, Dr. Wilson, they do provide oxygen. And so as we sleep at night, there's also this cleaning that happens. And so our brains are actually going through a process of being cleaned at night. And then the plants are essentially doing the cleaning of the air as well. So I would always recommend for people, anyone moving through an unseen injury, particularly a traumatic event, if they can, to ask people who really do want to be helpful in their recovery to send plants. And so I went from having no plants to now 30 plants, and two of which, all of them that I love so much, and they have really, they brought me joy and they continue to bring healing.
Yes, yes. Really, it is an addictive collection that one can start. And then when
Yes,
they start,
indeed.
yeah, they start taking over, and but you just can't part ways with them, and they really do become a. I would liken plants, and oh my goodness, I hope we don't get any people who are like, no, that's not a fair comparison. And I would have to say that my affinity for them is comparable to those who have pets. You look at them, you hear people, the pet people out there, and oh, and I feel same way about my plants
For
as
sure.
well.
They're living.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. There you go. What's going on with you? You're a little droopy today. I'm over here a little sad and looking at my orchid in my office. I'm like, oh, your petals. That's not a good sign. So, but I'll work on that a little bit. But it does have such a healing effect on the mind and your aura, your spirit is transformed because it allows you to then just focus and step out of whatever the moment is. And so that's what my orchid in my office provides for me. Just to
Yeah.
kind of step away from, the mayhem that might be going on, because that's in every workplace and reflective of what's going on in the greater society too. Enough of
Yeah.
plants, because we could talk about that all day, and books and all of our passions and love. By the way, your library is always a treat for my eyes, and have been enjoyed it immensely just being in your home at times, just perusing your bookshelves. But I want to go back to the Reframe Brain, what we can expect from it. You've already had some amazing guests, and you've been on some amazing shows, very recently to discuss the growth process, what your plans for it, and the impact and the target audience. So share a little bit about that.
Absolutely. It's I'm very excited about the guest that we have coming up for March the 7th. So I was very intentional with the way the podcast airs. It's the first and third Monday of every month.
Okay.
It's on a Monday specifically because when people think about Mondays, it's like, oh, having to go back to work, having a case of the Mondays, here we go. But I actually love Mondays. To Mondays for me, breathe. It's a breath of fresh air. It's a fresh start, new opportunities. That's the way in which I think of Monday. So I really wanted to kind of impact people to say, hey, there's something to look forward to, a renewed perspective, which is the Reframe Brain podcast. So this Monday, Monday, March 7th, will be Dr. Nanette Spencer. Dr. Nanette Spencer is an alumni of Albany State University. She had she has a brain injury. She was in a horrible accident when she was 16 years old. And she'll share a little bit about that, but was in the Ronald McDonald House for a period of time, and talk about some of the things that she moved through. What is most impressive about her story is how, not only how she talks about it, but looking at this young woman and knowing that who you're talking to is a person who did sustain a brain injury. You're talking to Dr. Nanette Spencer. She has her doctorate in nursing. So she walks us through the accommodations, some of the things she said no to, what she said yes to, primarily being yes to herself. And I'm really excited for people to hear that. And I think that it is really excellent that during Brain Injury Awareness Month, that she will be gracing us with her testimony. So she will be coming up March 7th. We also have coming up another licensed nurse practitioner. She's a stress solution strategist. She was a clinical scientist and actually came back to practice during the pandemic, and saw that a lot of people within her particular discipline were burning out at an incredible rate. She talks about that I believe it's over 500,000, 500,000 nurses have resigned, retired, or just said they don't want anything else to do with the profession since 2020. She's also going to talk to the audience a little bit more about not only how the pandemic has impacted nurses, the crisis that we already had going into the pandemic around nurses, but the alarming number of nurses that have died by suicide since 2020 as a result of the pandemic, and what that looks like a day kind of walking in the shoes of a nurse. So she's really, really amazing. Happy to have her. We're also going to have a master yogi on. She has been practicing yoga for 15 years. She does it specifically through a Christian faith lens. She's going to provide some really practical ways that people can really exercise wellness, and a few different poses that people can use not only in the morning or the afternoon, just throughout the day, to help bring them back, ground them back, the grounding piece that we talked about a little bit earlier. We also have a clinical psychologist coming up, and all of this is just wonderful Black girl magic that's been speaking that I'm talking about. So it's really, really exciting. And she's going to be walking us through a lot of what I have had intimate experience around, is really taking a really critical look at the brain, and not just the emoting part of the brain, but the science of the emoting part of the brain. So those are a few of the wonderful slate of guests that we have coming up. And it's the first and third Monday of every month. And if people go to TheReframedBrain.com, they'll be able to get my 5 best brain health tips, a playlist that I curated with them in mind, a copy of the newsletter, and then they'll be able to see and add to their calendar, okay, this is when the Reframed Brain is going to be coming out. So I definitely want to make sure that I have the notifications turned on my YouTube channel, or if they'd rather listen to it through Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever they get their podcasts or listen to podcasts from.
Yeah, I love that you're on all of the major platforms, so there's no excuse in terms of the ability to access that. You mentioned the newsletter. I'd be remiss. You didn't give me permission to say this, but I'm gonna go ahead and take liberties, big sister liberties. You are also working on a book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. I am so excited. The book cover, actually, interestingly enough, was done 8 years before. And so the writing process is something that I have to say that I was always very grateful that I retained the ability to write, because there was a lot that was like I suffered significant memory loss, and have been able to regain some memory, not fully all memory. And that is, I've been very honest to say I'm well with whatever is restored to me. So now, and viewers foresee kind of when we get a little bit closer, when they are able to glean, and you have seen the book cover, when they see the book cover, it is so fitting for what I am moving through right now. And even with the title of the book, which I'm definitely going to wait until a little bit more closer to it being completed. But the ability and the time to write and what I'm writing about and how people, no matter what their background, will be able to connect with it is something that I'm really, really excited about.
I am too. We've been holding each other accountable on our projects, and so I look forward to that fully coming to fruition, having you come back, and already manifesting that you were on national platforms discussing that book and presenting and connecting people with that way. Because in that way, that's just a remarkable way to share one story is through the pages of a book. It helps for others to identify, to serve as a source of inspiration, to remind you that this too shall pass, and that we just have to walk into the greater that we envision for ourselves, and just to maintain perseverance. So again, I am excited about all of your accomplishments that await. Certainly, those that you have achieved. You have a massive portfolio of outstanding things that you've done. And that we can quickly reference. So thankful for film and video and documents so that we can again connect with you and learn so much about you. You are, and I know, like, is she going to brag about her the whole rest of the show? And we're going to get ready to wrap up, but you were such an outstanding example of, I just used the word perseverance, and you and I have discussed some very difficult days. We all have them. You certainly have had yours. If I could change any of it, I would selfishly want to change it for you. But that is not what the creator and the universe had in mind. But you keep moving forward. And I don't know that I've said this to you, certainly better. I never could envision that, but better than you were. Because you are so much more representative of all that is beautiful and an example of intelligence and dedication in the world. I could go on and on. You're a lovely, lovely parent. Certainly to my children, and to, we tease each other about how we were just really surrogates for one another's children. And and so that amazing young man that you brought into the world on my behalf, I thank you, is now a member of the United States Army and doing just so well. I love Jordan to pieces. And again, you give of yourself to so many people. And so I did not realize that we were approaching the anniversary. You said March 13th of
15th.
15th, yes, is a day of the accident. And so much has happened in just 1 year. I know. So that's on top of a pandemic, or pandemics, if you will, because we're dealing with so many crises, and certainly those that exist within marginalized communities live them on a daily basis. But again, that's the word that keeps popping up in my mind. Thank you for exempling perseverance and not staying in the moment and being held captive by that moment. I am super excited. I say this to you all the time about what your future looks like and what awaits. So thank you for now representing an entirely different demographic of people that are challenged at times or ongoing with mental health and wellness. But let me rephrase that. That's all of us these days, isn't it? Aren't we all?
It really is. It was discussed in the State of Union address. It is really staggering the number of people that are moving through. There was the American Medical Association created a whole nother term, coronasomnia, and that is the disruption of sleep due to the pandemic. I mean, it really is. And that is why a renewed perspective, that is why the Reframed Brain podcast actually does exist, and really, as I said before, envelops all of us, because these unseen injuries, the anxiety, the stressors, the insomnia, whether or not a person has a diagnosis, it has touched each and every one of us to some degree. And so understanding how we can respond to that in another way, and that we ourselves can become an environment of healing. We do that in very intimate ways. And so the Reframed Brain podcast really does seek, and it is our mission to really embed people with those things. And for more than anything else, because we cannot, we can only hold ourselves accountable to the ways with which we respond to things. Would love to have that switch and turn off the pandemic, turn off toxic environments. However, there's something that we can do in and of ourselves, understanding that there are other things that will come to kind of help shift those situations. And so I say to that, we can reframe our brain, and there are ways, there are tools, there are techniques, there are people that work in various spaces, some of which were new to me, that really do specialize in these type of disciplines that really do focus on all levels of wellness. And it all starts with the most powerful and complex organ in the body, and that is our brain. We're not machines. We're not machines. We are divine, intelligent beings, and we need to gift ourselves with feeding that every day. You're not a machine. We work with machines. We create machines. We utilize machines, but we are divine, intelligent beings, delicately put together. And so that is what the Reframed Brain exists to make sure that people understand on a daily basis. Be kind to yourself.
Be kind to yourself. Thank you so much for saying that. You also reminded me, because this is such a pervasive problem, particularly in communities of color, specifically African American community. I remember growing up as a child, and particularly when you would hear about someone who, committed or attempted suicide. And, oh, we don't do that in the Black community. We, when you get depressed, when you get frustrated, we just go take a nap. I don't know, I'm older than you are. So I don't know if you ever heard that. And I remember hearing that as a child. That was just something that we did not do. But that was an unfortunate denial of that we are emotional beings, and that we are affected by the conditions that we find ourselves in, that we the interactions, the systematic institutions that were designed to destroy us or to hold us physically captive. And Dr. Naeem Akbar wrote a book on the psychological chains of slavery. And so how that whole history has altered our DNA. And we still carry that the weight of our ancestors with us, and then still have to navigate 2022 and all that comes with it. During your earlier conversation or our exchange, I was reminded a couple weeks ago, unfortunately, a lot of HBCUs, Albany State was certainly one of them. We were under attack and had bomb threats, and we had to, stop instruction. And so we responded to it accordingly. FBI has been involved, and but I share that to say, our administration, our senior leadership team, the president said, of course we had to convene, and the instruction piece aside, we had to be concerned about the safety and well-being of our greatest treasure, our students. And in that moment, we were, trying to pivot and make sure that systems were in place and that we were protecting and working with law enforcement. I had a moment, and we were drafting communications, and I said, we've got to make sure that we incorporate or remind students, faculty, and staff that they have access to the suite of services under counseling and accessibility. Because on top of the pandemic, on top of, the George Floyd moment, and, when we get in our vehicles, are we going to make it home? All of those things we process and deal with consciously or unconsciously. And so when we had to deal with the bomb threat, I had to raise my hand. I said, we've got to make sure that you remind students that these services are available to them, because this is going to be triggering to some people. It was triggering to me. And so my anxiety started, something else to do, to process and to deal with. And so it is absolutely a lot. Having said that, it is important that we are intentional with our care, not only the physical care, but what we ingest, what we take into our minds and our environment, who we engage with. And so, the running joke in our circle, I 8:30, you have a great story. that's that's the bewitching hour for me. I'm just like, oh, I've got to shut it down. And yeah, so loved ones who know that, yeah, I'm headed upstairs, going to the bed. And if I'm out, yeah, I'm looking at the clock. Yeah, it's time for me. I just cannot hang. And people will tell me, did you hear or did you read this in the news? And I have to be very honest. I did not. Yeah, I went to sleep watching Columbo or Murder, She Wrote. I have to keep it light. I just can't. So intentionality is just it's essentially critical these days, to make sure that we have all aspects of a healthy life.
Amen. I could not have said it any better than ourselves. And the CDC recommends that we get at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep for those who are 18 years plus. And so exactly, we want for our brains to go through the diffusion process, which is cleaning all the toxins and things that don't need to be hanging around in our brain. We need for our brain to go through that process. And the way it does that is through sleep. So yeah, getting to bed in between the 10, 11 o'clock hours, the sweet spot. If any time earlier than that is all the better, because that means that we're probably not eating, we're probably not on our phones. So
Right.
that 8:30, that all of us know that and have a very clear understanding of 8:30 being the time with which Dr. Wilson has already started dialing it down. That really speaks to how you really do prioritize, and why you're able to execute at the level that you're able to execute. So I say kudos to you, Dr. Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. My children always want to joke, as you know about it, but whatever. I'm like, let's lock it down. Yeah, when they live with me, we're shutting it down. But I could go on, and I don't want Connie Williams to get on me, and we need to get ready to wrap it up. But share with the viewers one last time how they can access the Reframed Brain. You are also doing speaking engagements, and so points of contact if someone wants to reach you to have you come and share your just super story of perseverance, and then transitioning into the next. So give us some points of contact.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. And I want to say I'm really honored. Thank you again to you, Dr. Wilson, to Connie Williams, and all of those folks who make production happen at Albany State University. Thank you again for this opportunity. The Reframed Brain podcast can be found on YouTube. So if you Google the Reframed Brain podcast, it'll come up for you very easily there on YouTube. Also available on Apple Pod, Google Play, Amazon Music. You can talk to Alexa. Alexa will bring me right up. Spotify, and other select podcast platforms. I'm always available on social media. If you send me a DM, I will respond, because that's some of the ways that people are saying, hey, we're really interested in you. On Twitter and IG, I'm at one Erica Savage, and that's the number one Erica Savage, because there is only one Erica Savage on Twitter and IG. I'm on Facebook. It is my whole name, Erica Savage Wilson. And if people want to reach out to me for speaker requests, I do have some exciting things that are coming forward this spring, because people are really seeing the importance of mental health, brain health, and unseen injuries. If you go to TheReframedBrain.com, you'll see all of my information there. But if you send an email to TheReframedBrain@gmail.com, I'll get that. And I typically respond within 24 hours. I don't like to leave people kind of hanging and wondering, but The calendar is open and available for those opportunities. And so I do have a couple already scheduled. So I'm more than excited and motivated.
Outstanding. I see my clock about to wrap up. I love and adore you to pieces. Thank you so much for joining me for this edition of Realizing Potential. Know that you are always, always back. Welcome back to, welcome to come back to the show. Please be well. Take care.
Thank you, Dr.
Yours.
Wilson.
Thank you.